Good morning, everyone. I am calling to order our regularly scheduled meeting of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Elizabeth Glidden, and I am the chair of this committee. And I am joined today by my colleagues, Council Members Gordon, Cano, Reich, Bender, Council President Johnson. I'll just note is at the state capitol on city business. Councilmember Johnson is here, and then Council Members Yang, Quincy, Warsami, Goodman, Fry, and Palmisano. And we are a quorum, and we are ready to do the business of today. There are two items listed on our agenda, but I'm going to make a motion to amend the agenda to add a third item. And I want to ask the clerk, I think this third item was put somewhere in our book, and I'm completely unclear where it is. But the third item, let me first make the motion to amend the agenda to add as item number 3, a resolution proposed by Councilmember Reich regarding Southwest Light Rail. And I'll make that motion. And maybe Mr. Carl or Ms. Armstrong could tell us where the materials are.
Madam Chair, the draft resolution is located under the Cal tab in your agenda book behind the first report.
Okay.
And it should be labeled with today's date, 9:30 a.m., which is the most recent copy we received just before today's meeting.
All right. Thank you very much. And so that motion to amend the agenda is before us. Discussion, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed. And the agenda is amended. We are joined today by our Hennepin County Attorney, Mike Freeman. And I just want to say we are very excited to have him with us. And although he's listed as item number 2, we were going to invite him to address the Committee of the Whole first. As we know, we are a council with a lot of new members, and I think reinforcing some of our critical partnerships is helpful and important, and just want to welcome County Attorney Freeman. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I wanted to report to everyone on the council, my feet will be stuck directly on the spot. I haven't had to step on the spot since I was in the military, but I learned how, and I will follow that. But thank you very much.
How we do it at the city.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and I'm impressed that you all do much better than we used to do in the Minnesota Senate when we operated in Senate time, which is always late. You all are here and ready to go, and I will be, for a politician and a lawyer, uncharacteristically brief. But let me just say that one of the things I try to do as county attorney is to communicate to the folks we serve what we do and what the status of crime is. And I've just finished going to many of the suburban communities, and the news is good. Crime overall in the county is down. But I'm also particularly pleased to be here in Minneapolis, where I was born. I'm a product of Seward Elementary and Middle School. And my family and I live in Southwest, where son Jack is 15 at Southwest and doing quite well in the brand new big building that Southwest High School is. And the word in Minneapolis is also good. Violent crime is down 40%. 40% since 2006. I'd like to attribute that all to when I was returned as county attorney, but that simply isn't fair. But the good news for all of us is the concern about crime is down because crime is down. And some of the concerns people express about living in our fine urban area simply could be answered with topics like that. Violent crime is down. The more minor property crime is down 17% as well. Let me put a caveat on that. One violent crime is one violent crime too much. We have work to do. But let me just talk and frame it a little bit about why this crime is down. And in my view, there really are 4 reasons. Relationships, aggressive prosecution, crime prevention, and technology. Let me take it from the top. First off, relationships are absolutely critical to keeping crime down and to solving and prosecuting criminal cases. First off, our office gets along very well with your police department. First with Chief Dolan, who's a personal friend, and Chief Harteau, who I like and respect. We have good working relationships. Now, our jobs are a bit different, and sometimes the lines get a little blurred. Police investigate and arrest. Prosecutors charge and prosecute. I can't arrest anybody. The cops can't prosecute anybody. And so sometimes those lines get blurred, and we get news reports that such and such police chief says they're going to prosecute a person for this. Well, they can't do that. But I can't tell them who to arrest either. And so sometimes there's some healthy tension, and I call it healthy because sometimes the police have a case they're absolutely convinced that we ought to prosecute. But if there isn't sufficient admissible evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, we can't issue the complaint. And if we do, we're wrong. And so there's tension in the cases they bring us, and is there enough? And sometimes we send them back to get more. Now, your police department might say in a quiet moment, listen, those prosecutors got to have a confession, DNA, blood tests, 5 eyewitnesses before they take a case. Well, that simply isn't true. But I am proud that nearly 70% of the cases brought to us are charged, which says your police department's doing a good job. We've got good working relationships with your city attorney's office and with your city attorney, Susan Siegel. That hasn't always been the case. It is now, and I'm very appreciative of that. We work together on a lot of things, like in the first precinct, the Crime Watch and the work there trying to reduce the habitual criminals and livability crimes downtown. Or like in the Domestic Abuse Service Center, our award-winning service center which treats victim survivors of domestic abuse with dignity and respect. Cross-designation. One day there's a city attorney there capable of charging misdemeanors, gross misdemeanors, or felonies. The next day it's one of ours. And that is simply seamless. And that's important. The third group is the community group. We need folks to come forward. We need the eyes and ears and the comments. And some of our court watches are extraordinary. They provide impact statements. They're eyes and ears. They're people we can talk to. And you know the ones in your districts better than I do. But we send people to each one of those meetings, and they're really invaluable in terms of developing relationships. Because, you know, folks don't come forward. We have no witnesses. We can't move forward. And here in Minneapolis, I think we're pretty fortunate because people do. The second item is successful prosecution. I'm proud that our prosecution rate, which means that for every case charged, 94% either plead guilty or found guilty at trial. That's just about right. If it was higher than that, we weren't taking some cases that we probably should, and it was a lot lower, we'd have to stop for remedial training. It's about right, and it's been consistently that for a long time. Our focus, frankly, Madam President, members, is gun crimes. There simply is no excuse for any person who has a prior felony to carry a gun. And we go after them like crazy. Your police officers know, bring us the gun case and we will push the edge to take it. Because folks who have already committed a crime and are packing are way too likely to be either the shooter, the person shot, or the person next to either of them. That's not good for our society. And we work very closely with the United States Attorney's Office. And frankly, we look for which previous crimes that person has committed and where we can get them the most time. And I'm not apologizing for a second. That gun violence impacts our lives more than anything else. And we have a motto in our office. We want you to be aggressive about charging a gun, but in our vernacular, you don't eat a gun. You don't dismiss the gun charge to make it easier to have the other charge go through. That has to be specifically approved way up the chain. And I don't approve very many of those. We'll take our chances, and probably the cases that we are not successful at probably are more likely to be gun cases than others because we're aggressive. Domestic abuse is another one. We've talked about the service center that you were familiar with, but I also want to share today, as I do in many places. Gentlemen, domestic abuse is a learned trait. There's no young boy child that's born with a gene that says beat up your loved ones or your mother or your daughters or your girlfriend. They learn it. We have to imbue in our young men that abuse against women is just not okay. Let me tell you a little story. When I was 9, my sister was 11, and she was bigger than me, and she bullied me. And so I walloped her a good one day. My mother said, "What did you do?" She says, no, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm going to wait for your father to come home. No, please do not do that to me. I do not want that to happen. My father, the former Marine Corps colonel, and at that time governor of Minnesota, came home, and there's a hushed conversation in the bedroom upstairs. My father said, what did you do? Well, he said, she got in my face, so I hit her. She's older and she's bigger. He said, no, that's not acceptable in this family. Well, why not? Son, what would you think if I hit your mother? Oh, you'd never do that. He says, right. But what would you think if I did? Well, that's wrong. Treat every woman like you want your mother treated. Wow. I've used that over and over again. But I was a lucky guy because I had a father, and he was home, and he cared, and he created respect. Gentlemen, we have a lot of work to do in that. At the legislature introduced yesterday is my fourth attempt at making domestic abuse, felonious domestic abuse, a predicate crime for a felon in possession. That means if you did domestic abuse, felony domestic abuse, you can't carry a gun. Now, why I can't get that through the legislature, I don't know, but we're going to keep trying. And it's all that mess with guns. Crime prevention is pretty important. Let me just take a minute. We do a number of things. We divert a lot of cases. The lower level drug offenders are not going to prison from Hennepin County. They get one, sometimes two chances to work through that. We have drug court. We try to treat the illnesses that addiction brings. We can all agree that, the folks whose problem is addiction need treatment, and the folks who are just selling a lot of this junk because of greed, I don't know treatment for greed other than sending them out to Stillwater. That's a good place for them to go. But we try to do that. We do a lot of diversion with juveniles. We work with MPD. We work with other police forces trying to make sure that more minor crimes, particularly by juveniles, they have a chance to kind of say, hey, this was not a very smart idea. Can't we do better? 98% of juveniles who commit a felony were truant first. Our Be at School program is nationally recognized as a great way of getting kids into school. Why isn't a 9-year-old in school? And for the suggestion that the 9-year-old has to babysit for the 2- and 3-year-old because mom has to work is not a good reason. See, the job of a 9-year-old is to go to school, and we have to help get her there. And we do that. Shoes, transportation, clothes, other problems. We have a very detailed and involved program, and I'm pleased to report that the folks who have been in that program, 95% of them had no unexcused absences in the first 90 days after starting. We need to get these kids in school. Finally, and the clerk will hand out when I'm done talking, so you all have to listen to me. Our newest effort, which is a anti-gun violence play directed at our youth. I've commissioned a play written by Syl Jones and done by Mixed Blood Theater, and we're in high schools right now talking to kids about there are other ways to deal with things other than bullying, making fun of people, ridicule, or using guns. I've seen several performances. We had the first one on Monday in Southwest. We break the kids into their classroom size and have a discussion. And, these young people are plenty darn smart. And they've seen a lot more life than little Mikey Freeman did in South Minneapolis when I was growing up. But they're good kids. And they listened, and they talked about things they needed to talk about. And by the way, since we're all elected officials and concerned about tax dollars, this is paid for with drug forfeiture money. That's the money we take from drug dealers when we bust them and we find a bunch of cash there. A good deal of that goes to law enforcement, including MPD. Some of it goes to prosecutors. And I can't think of a better way to take drug forfeiture dollars and a better use than having an anti-gun violence play directed at kids. Finally, I want to say technology has made a lot of difference. MPD has one of the best technology force around. Their Code 4, if you haven't sat in on that, you should. It's unbelievable in how far it's come. And their capacity to predict where the next crime is going to be committed and putting the right forces in the street is extraordinary. There's all sorts of other things. Our extraordinary device is DNA. DNA is the truth serum. Literally, the science is without question now that the only person who can have the same DNA as you is your identical twin. No one else in the world. And it's a wonderful tool not only to be used in prosecuting people who committed crimes, but eliminating a person as a suspect who didn't commit it. The technology is just great. Let me just give you one last example, and I'll stand for questions if you have time, Madam Chair. Robert Skogstad, in 1985, brutally raped and murdered a woman and disappeared. We had no idea who did it. It was a cold case. It sat there for a long time. Steve Redding of our office, one of the leaders in DNA technology, on a cold hit case working with your police department, matched it up with a little spot of DNA that was left behind. In 1985, it was too small an amount to use. They saved it. We had a match with Skogstad, who had committed another crime in California. We found him in Kansas. We charged him. He's doing real time now for a 1985 rape and murder. That's good stuff. That family finally has closure. And we continue to work on those cases, and we continue to work on them, Madam Chair, very closely with your fine police force. I'll be glad to answer a question.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you again so much for making time from your schedule to come. And I just think the personal interaction between yourself and the City Council is really important to remind ourselves of the importance of this relationship. And I think not everyone may recognize the depth of how strongly we work together and how important that relationship is. So I wanted to say thank you. We do have a couple of questions, and we will take those questions, but I just want to remind council members we do have a public hearing right after this, and then we will have a presentation on Southwest Light Rail. So with that, Councilmember Andrew Johnson.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say thank you so much. It's incredible to hear all the amazing work you're doing, especially this play that you're putting together. I think that's it's innovative. It really is, and it's a way to reach out and get in front of people before they potentially go down the wrong path. And I just want to thank you on behalf of all the folks that I know for your work. We'll never know truly how many people that has been influencing, and we can see the crime going down, which is a great trend, but you really touch so many lives in a way that they'll never know, and I think that's important to recognize. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Gordon.
Well, I'm sure that all of us up here could talk about the great work and how much we appreciate the county attorney's office and all they've done, and I don't think we will, but I just wanted to mention that the involvement in Court Watch is crucial, and it's vital seeing the community attorneys out there on National Night Out. When there's a critical incident, having the involvement of your office is really key. It's also been really beneficial to have your involvement in our youth violence prevention plan, and as we're rolling that out, and we look forward to continued partnerships in that area and in others. And if you need somebody to testify and be there on behalf of the gun control bill that you mentioned, I think we'll be there, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.
All right. And then I know if the council president was here, she would want to personally thank you, but I'll just mention that she and I were together in a meeting yesterday to talk about problem property issues with our housing staff. And again, this is another critical partnership that we have with the county on how we address some of those issues. So I just wanted to say again, thank you, and thank you on behalf of the council president. And to our clerk, we just had an item passed out from the county attorney. I might ask that it be linked to our agenda so others in the public can see this as well. This is on the Stars and Stripes program. And since this is just a verbal presentation, I don't think we need to receive and file. Is that correct? All right. So I will then just say again, thank you very much, Mr. Freeman, and we're so pleased to have you with us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members.
Thank you. All right, we next have, and I'm going to invite up Mr. Strobel to introduce our next item, which is overview of where we are at with the Minneapolis vision, values, goals, and strategic direction. I believe we're going to have a brief presentation, and then we will open the public hearing. And the presentation will review what has been some community interaction and requests for comments that have happened with some other meetings that have happened to date. So thank you, Mr. Strobel.
Great. Good morning, Chair Glidden, members of the committee. My name is Jay Strobel. I'm the Deputy City Coordinator here at the city. I'm just going to be providing a very brief overview of the public comment that we've received to date. And just as a reminder, the window of public comment opened on February 19th and will run until March 14th. I'm going to be touching on three things today: the individual ward briefs and community meetings that have taken place, a review of the electronic feedback, and then what's next. First, there has been 3 meetings to date. All of those have been available to residents throughout the city. There's been approximately 70 attendees in total. There's been different formats used for each one, but there's been similar formats that we've heard. Overall, we're getting general broad support for the goals and values that we've drafted. There's a great deal of interest in how the city is going to go about accomplishing this work, and I'll come back to that towards the end, and also how we're going to measure our progress. And there, again, just want to reiterate, there's been a number of suggestions on how some of the strategies that people would like to see the city use. The first brief that took place was on February 22nd. It was a presentation on both the city and ward goals and values. There was approximately 15 attendees. I think that the weather had a bit of impact on that one. The comments were largely limited to the values, specifically a couple of comments that came out, which is relevant for our discussion regarding equity, was that there was an interest in a broader notion around equity rather than specifically focusing on racial equity, also recognizing, though, that is a priority. Also appreciation of the fact that transportation and collaboration were part of the values and the description of the values, so that was nice to see. And then the conversation proceeded to go on to a more focused conversation around the neighborhood association work. The next conversation that took place was on February 28th. This conversation involved some panel members, 3 panel members is my understanding, approximately 35 or so attendees. Conversation focused with the panel members around transportation, business development or growth, as well as racial equity. There was a voting exercise, and through that voting exercise, there was support, again, for all the goals, although the one Minneapolis goal seemed to rise to the top in terms of interest for that group. And then finally, there was, again, additional interest on exactly how this work will be implemented and be monitored in the years to come. For the third conversation that's taken place, that was on March 3rd, there's a brief introduction followed by generally a 2-hour conversation. There's approximately 20 attendees. Again, large general support for the goals. Most of the comments were focused on what actions that the city would take. One comment that was made was, we've seen similar goals before, but what's going to be done different this time? And I think that that's a good example of partly what we heard in some of the other conversations. Some of the ideas that came out of this were very specifically focused around the areas of crime, housing, development, and jobs. This particular conversation took place in North Minneapolis, and there was some very specific interest around North Minneapolis and these topic areas. And when we go about measuring things, and interest in not only looking at measuring things across the city, but also looking at how we're making progress in the different geographic areas of the city. In terms of electronic feedback, we've received a few more emails than the 10 I have identified here. There's been a variety of input. Once again, there's been specific suggestions on how the values and goals can be accomplished, and some of the pieces that have come out in terms of what might be missing or a little bit more specifics that people would like to see have been around issues of youth, seniors, accessibility, and food. In terms of next steps, clearly we have the public hearing today. We will continue to have the feedback loop through email open until the 14th of March. At that point, our office is going to go through a process of reviewing that information, sharing all the comments because they are all part of the public record with the elected officials, and then go about the work of reviewing that information and seeing what adjustments we might need to make to the proposed language that's available to the public at this point, and then work towards adoption on May 26th. Finally, in terms of the how piece, to answer that question, and this is a slide that was presented 2 weeks ago at Committee of the Whole, we've been largely focused at the very top part of this triangle, identifying that draft vision, values, goals, and strategic directions, working towards adoption on the 26th of March. The how piece, how we're going to go about accomplishing these things is really going to take place in conversations that we intend to have around our strategic directions. These conversations will take place, we expect, between May and August, and that we want to involve some of our community members, community partners, policymakers, and appropriate department staff in these conversations to identify, again, some of the specifics on the how and how we're going to measure our progress. In addition, departments are going to begin their work starting in April on their business plans as well. So some of the how we're going to accomplish this will come through that effort. So with that, that's the conclusion of my remarks.
So thank you very much, Mr. Strobel. I appreciate, again, the work that you and your team in the city coordinator's office have done to facilitate and steer this process. And we do have a couple of, I think, questions, and I just want to double check that these are questions that council members want before the public hearing, and that is just fine if you do, or you want a discussion afterwards. Councilmember Warsame, did you want to go ahead now with a clarifying question, or?
No, it wasn't a question. I just wanted to
comment.
I just wanted to update that in Ward 6 we've already had one public hearing regarding this issue in the Augustana building in Elliott Park yesterday, and we're going to send the information, what we found out, to you. And we also have another public meeting in Cedar Riverside scheduled on Friday at 6 p.m. Yesterday we had about 22 attendees, and they were all senior citizens. And the one in Cedar Riverside, we expect to have about 100, hopefully. And then we're going to have another one just for the general Ward 6 specific
Okay.
one. So I wanted to update that.
Thank you so much for that, Councilmember Warsame. And I would just say to other council members that if you have upcoming events where you hope to have some discussion with residents around the goals that the city coordinator staff has offered, if you desire to be there to also help you with recording the event and taking notes and just assisting you in whatever way you feel is helpful. And I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add, Mr. Strobel.
Chair Glidden and Councilmember Warsame, we're happy to help out as needed. It's great for us to be, hear those conversations so we can, best synthesize that work in the weeks ahead.
Okay. And then Councilmember Yang, did you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say, Councilmember Warsame is just showing off now.
Okay. He may be. So. All right. Thank you. So I am going to go ahead and open the public hearing. I don't know if there are people who want to speak. There is no one who has signed up to speak. But again, I think there's been a lot of both meetings that have happened or kind of are happening more in the community and other informal comments that are happening. So I just would say if anyone would like to be part of the hearing and speak, we are here to listen to your comments. I'm not seeing anyone. You're welcome to come forward, and please, if you could, let us know your name and your address for the record, and we'll take your comments.
Sure. My name is Happy Reynolds. I live on 15th Avenue South in Ward 6. First and foremost, sorry for my casual attire. I was actually trying to get out the winter doldrums and then realized it was 10 and ran over, so apologies. Thank you very much for having this meeting. No offense to the city coordinator, I'm a little bit appalled at the amount of people out of our population, which I did a quick math, which is 0.0001% of the Minneapolis population talking about our strategic goals, which is not in condemnation of any one person or organization in this room. It just, to me, states that we all have a lot of work to do in terms of getting the word out and actually getting the public invested in our city. So, just as a general rule. And on that, in terms of utilizing the other things, I would hope that people continue to use Facebook and Twitter and other ways to kind of interact, not just neighborhood meetings, because that doesn't always get everyone, and we should still have neighborhood meetings. I will hope that the City Council includes in our strategic vision youth violence prevention. It is huge. It is part of what we should have actually as a separate thing and stated in our vision and our goals. It is part of having a city that is safe and growing, and I think that's part of our vision, is growing the city. And as a person who is a parent of small children, I want a safe city and one that my children and everyone's children can actually thrive in. So I did not see that specifically stated in our goals, and I would hope that we would do that. I also think in that, I wish we would look at some of the health and safety and equity issues in terms of food access and access to outdoor activities, such as parks, swimming pools, and other things that are for the public. That is a huge part of safety and health, and is a huge disparity in, I know, my ward and Ward 6, and also I think in North. And that has something more to do often with our economic thing. Didn't mean to call you out there, Councilman Yang, but, and I think the final thing, Councilman Bender, I think you are on this committee, looking at connectivity of our wards so that it's not just we talk about over North, because to me that's still Minneapolis, or we talk about my neighborhood, that is still Minneapolis. We're all one city, or Northeast, and we need to think about how do we make those neighborhoods actually just somewhere we go to because we all live in the city. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I will ask if there is anyone else who would like to be part of the public hearing. And if you do, just feel free to come forward. And if you could introduce yourself, your name and your address, and we'll have that for the public record then.
Okay. My name is Roxanne O'Brien. I'm an organizer from the community and an activist and a mother, friend, and very political and vocal. So I live at, excuse me, I just moved, 3306 Emerson Avenue North. I'm in Barb's ward now. And I came today I wrote it down so I don't waste anybody's time here, because I heard about the conversation about the disparities. And I and many others were infuriated and sick to our stomachs to know that there was a debate going on between council members on whether or not that they had the power to eliminate racial disparities. For generations, the myth of race and white supremacy has haunted and affected African and indigenous people all over the world. We have been slapped in the face by the history books that are in the school institutions that are teaching our children. We have had to teach our children the truth about the inequitable racist system that targets our people. We have been told to be patient, to be kind, be understanding, be calm, and not to be angry when in fact we have every right to be and everyone knows it. How dare anyone stand in the way or prolong our rights as human beings on this land? If you're unsure about your abilities to change this unjust, inhumane white supremacist system, then you are part of the reason it continues. And I demand that you step down and move out the way. Because we are angry, we have families, and we will not be treated as a people with racial problems while whites get jobs to fix us. And those with power, like many of you, created this problem, consciously or unconsciously. If you say it cannot be on your 4-year terms, then you are saying it will continue. You are saying it's okay to lock up and separate black families, then throw them back into a world where they can no longer function in a society. You're saying it's okay for history books to lie and hold back truth to our children in schools. You're saying it's okay for us to be without homes and businesses that can help provide for our families and community. You are saying it's okay for corporations, institutions, and banks to do crimes against us? You're saying it's okay for whites to get privileges because whiteness is the system, and everyone who is not is the system's piggy bank for this capitalistic economy, while in reality, it's not a success. It's extracting and continuing to steal wealth and health from our communities. It's interesting and infuriating that we can still have a holiday for Christopher Columbus when we know he stole this land and was responsible for the deaths of innocent people and the destruction of generations after. But we can't decide that the indigenous and people of color deserve a plan that will ensure the wellness and future of our lives? Step down if you're so powerless, because you have no rights or business here making decisions for us. And stop wasting our time. 500 years plus was enough.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make some comments as part of the public hearing? All right. Anyone else who'd like to make some comments? I just want to make sure I'm offering the opportunity. And regardless of the official public hearing, I just want to say again that we're still doing additional activities to gain comment, and I know that people are also submitting some different written comments and those kinds of things. So I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. I know there are a couple of council members who are in queue to make comments, and then I also wanted to make a few comments that are more about the process pieces and some staff directions that I will be intending to continue to work on and bring forward when we adopt the goals that are more about the how and the monitoring. Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. And I appreciate the comments and people that came in and other ones that are arriving. And I wanted to note that I think there's more that have been gathered on some discussion lists, because I tried to spread out pretty widely an invitation for feedback, and I'm trying to forward some of those to the City Goals email, but it's hard to maybe collect them all. But I would encourage other council members, if there's e-democracy discussion lists or other things in your areas, that's an opportunity to push the word out there as well. And also, I think we should find a way to try to collect some input from our advisory boards and commissions. I've been taking the little PowerPoint with me and trying to make it available on those that I serve on and when I'm attending them, and asking people to review it. But it's something I don't think we locked into our timeline to think there might be an opportunity for them to be reviewed, for the advisory groups to meet and formally give feedback before it comes back to us on the 26th, which I think, I apologize, it isn't something that I thought of sooner. It's a little bit of a misstep in the process, because that's a great opportunity. And I think if we actually, as a council, formally asked our advisory boards and commissions for a feedback and response and a review, we could get some really valuable information. So if there's any way to kind of push that more quickly, maybe look at the schedule, see if there's some that are still meeting that we could get the draft to before they meet and give some time on their agenda. That could be some fantastic input. I know actually from the Youth Violence Prevention group, that's how we've collected, I think, 3 of the 10 responses now, is just because I went and actually talked about it. So we've got to get more than 10 emails into us all, so we know what's going on there. And I've had some conversations with people too, and some other emails, and that's certainly going to be informing my thoughts on it as it moves forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon. Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank Ms. Roxanne O'Brien for coming and giving her thoughts and speech today. I did want to address one particular point that she discussed, which was the Columbus celebration. And we are working pretty heavily with the Native American community through NACD and with my staffer, Ashley Fairbanks, to figure out how the city council can take a more honorific approach at Indigenous communities and relook at Columbus Day. So I just wanted to put that out there for the public record, that we are following the lead of the Native American community on this issue. It is an important issue, but it's important that they lead on this particular project and initiative. I know that there's been some media about this in other cities, and most of us want to jump at the gun and kind of get it done, but it's important that this is a community-led effort by Native American voices. So thank you, Ms. Roxanne. I know you're not here, but your words were powerful.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say a few things. One is that I wanted to thank Jay and Cassidy in the coordinator's office for just the fantastic work that you've done. I think to some extent, with what we're doing here, I think it's guidance for us as a council, and I think the process is going to be very helpful for us for the next 4 years. And I wanted to report that in Ward 5 we did this listening session, and for the most part, the folks there just really and these are my words, not the words of the folks there, but really they just said to me, your plan is great and all that stuff, but really, we don't really want to focus on that all that much. We just want to see stuff done. And I think that's really powerful to me, just that, if we do what we're supposed to do as a council for the next 4 years, we will just be fine. I think having this as guidance will help us along the way, but certainly we should do some great things, and just looking forward to it.
Councilmember Andrew Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we continue as a society to utilize technology more and more, looking forward and thinking about this process, I think it would be very interesting if we potentially undertook putting together some sort of competition or coding event or something like that to develop for the next time we do the city's goals and strategic direction, some sort of web application that would allow residents to share, to rate, to discuss, and collaborate really around these goals in a way that kind of breaks the traditional model of going to a meeting and providing some feedback, but really allows people to dig in more and for it to be a very collaborative process. And look around at a lot of great web applications that are out there today where you're seeing things like this happen. And just looking forward, I think in the next few years, that's something that we should consider and move forward with. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments as well. And again, I indicated I wanted to give a little bit of just a verbal heads up on some staff directions that I've been working on with our staff in the coordinator's office, but also discussing with some of my colleagues and with the council president. And we'll continue to work with you to get them into a final shape for when we adopt our goals. But as has been mentioned, there is a lot of, I think, community conversation around the how. And, okay, so these are goals. They seem fine. But now how? And how do we measure? And how do we understand that we're on track, we're making progress? What does that mean? So we've been working on a staff direction that will, I think, hopefully put more into our culture within the city council, the policymaker interaction with getting reports back on at least an annual basis regarding the goals, progress around the goals, and helping develop effective measurements around the goals. And so that is something that we are working on so that we see that, we're more transparent and public about that. Another thing that we are working on putting in motion, and I want to thank both Council President Johnson, but also Councilmember Yang for his suggestions that I think were very well taken, that equity is playing a big piece in our conversations. It appears in our values and in the goal statement, but yet we may have very different personal definitions of what that means. And for us to use this as a guiding term, we need to figure out how we're coming together around a definition that we can give us some common ground and really help to guide our work. And so the coordinator is working on identifying a facilitator that will help us with a process that involves the council members in the mayor's office in a process to hopefully come out with something that will, again, give us a little bit more definition to this term so that it is more meaningful in guiding our work. And And then a last thing I wanted to mention is that we are looking at how staff may support council members and in particular council committees in potentially developing some work plans. And so again, this is something that's been discussed with some of the committee chairs and want to continue the discussion on whether that may be helpful. To do that, again, being a little bit more transparent with some of the proactive actions the committees may take and asking for reports and information. And this is something that other cities around the country are starting to do a little bit more as well. And with that, I think we need to receive and file this presentation, so I will move to receive and file. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And we have concluded with that item, so thank you very much. Next, we are to our item that was added to the agenda, which is a resolution and presentation that precedes the resolution relating to Southwest Light Rail. And I am a little bit unclear on who may lead. I know that we have a large staff team here that is prepared to present, I think, some underlying information. So Mr. Reginius is here from the mayor's office, and I will let you perhaps introduce what information we may have before us.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Peter Reginius, Policy Director for Mayor Hodges. I am one member of a team, as the Chair indicated, of the team of internal staff who have been meeting regularly for years working on the Southwest LRT project. That team includes Jenny Hager and Don Flom from Public Works, Jack Byers, Paul Mogish, and Beth Elliott from CPED, Corey Conover from the City Attorney's Office are regular attendees, as well as others. This is a big project which involves a lot of folks. If I ever sound remotely intelligent on technical matters, it is only because I've had the opportunity to soak up the expertise of our highly talented staff. It's an honor to work with them. Thank you for allowing me to kick things off. Mayor Hodges is strongly supportive of the resolution which has been developed by our staff and led by Councilmember Reich, including with the revised resolving clause. It is important and necessary that this be done, and Mayor Hodges is strongly supportive of that work. Why are we here? We are here because of what happened recently and because of what is about to happen. What happened recently? We, within the last few months, we got the results back from a study of freight and options for realigning freight that we fortunately have thanks to the intervention of the governor's office. And most recently, the city, the county, and all the cities along the corridor were given the opportunity to have their staffs respond to those draft reports, both a freight report and also some additional analyses on environmental questions. That is what has happened recently, and our staff has done great work in making sure that that those draft reports are informed by our city positions and expertise. What is about to happen? It is likely that between now and the next time you have the meeting of this group, the Committee of the Whole, the Met Council staff will make their recommendation to the Corridor Management Committee and the Met Council on how they suggest the freight issue be resolved. So this is our last opportunity as this body to talk about this issue and state the city's position before the Met Council staff makes that recommendation. The resolution before you simply reiterates the position that the city has held for many years, that we oppose co-locating both freight and LRT in the narrow Kenilworth corridor, and that opposition includes the shallow tunnels. And further, that we support LRT, Southwest LRT, as a project if the freight is relocated in a responsible way. Fortunately, we have a way to do that. Rerouting the freight with the Trans-Systems solution is a better option. Frankly, not just for Minneapolis, it is a better option for the region. It is a better option for St. Louis Park. It may seem odd that as part of this presentation, I and more importantly our professional staff will highlight these benefits for Minneapolis, for the region, and for the city of St. Louis Park, because frankly, if we don't do it, and here in this forum, it may not get said. It goes to the most basic question. So why do we build rail? It is more expensive. There must be a reason. Well, there are several. We get higher ridership with rail than with comparable bus service. But not just in year one. We get higher ridership over time because rail uniquely, in comparison to buses, has the ability to build its own ridership over time by catalyzing economic development. We are making a $1.5 billion investment in rail in this region. We should try to get the best bang for the buck. One of the things you will hear from our staff is that the way to get the best bang for the buck from a development standpoint is to relocate freight away from LRT stops, not just in Minneapolis, like with the West Lake Street station, but 2 stations in St. Louis Park, who would benefit extraordinarily, and the St. Louis Park tax base extraordinarily, from rerouting freight. This has not been talked about, and it's time. That is just one reason amongst many, and I will not list them all, that is just one reason amongst many that rerouting the freight is the best option for the city of Minneapolis, for the region, and for St. Louis Park. So my remaining role, and Don Flom has put a map up there for us to look at. My remaining role before I turn it over to Public Works and CPED is just to provide a little history. The history is long, and I will truncate it dramatically. Why are we in this situation? Well, in the late 1990s, the Minnesota Department of Transportation was backed into a corner while rebuilding the Hiawatha LRT line. As you may recall, freight used to run right through the heart of the city on what is today the Midtown Greenway, on its way to the yards in downtown St. Paul. When they were rebuilding Highway 55, Hiawatha Avenue, in anticipation of the Hiawatha LRT line, the engineers realized that freight would not be able to continue to use that historic path that it had used to get from western Minnesota and the Dakotas to downtown St. Paul. Freight had to be severed and no longer run in the Midtown, what is now the Midtown Greenway. It had to be severed at Highway 55, and it had to go elsewhere. Well, the folks who, the agencies who were responsible for this came up with an alternative. Instead of freight running through here along the Kenilworth corridor, this maybe isn't the best map for making this point. Instead of freight running through here and along the Kenilworth corridor, freight would run onto the M&S line up to BNSF and then into downtown Minneapolis. Instead of running here through St. Louis Park and Kenilworth, St. Louis Park and Minneapolis, it would run through here on the M&S. That was the plan. But at the last moment, when federal monies needed to be expended, they realized that a crucial site, the Golden Auto site, which is right in here, was contaminated and unfit for construction. At the same time, MnDOT was facing this quickly approaching expiration date on the federal funds needed for Highway 55, so the county allowed Twin City and Western Railroad to temporarily move to the publicly owned right-of-way in the Kenilworth corridor. Temporarily move all the way through here as opposed to continuing on what is today the Midtown Greenway. This was supposed to be for a maximum of 4 to 6 years, thus allowing time for environmental cleanup at the Golden Auto site. The state of Minnesota and others provided substantial funds to the city of St. Louis Park for remediation of that crucial site, and the Twin City and Western Railroad signed an agreement with Hennepin County to move their operations to the preferred M&S corridor when that corridor was ready and when the Golden Auto site was ready. Of course, that was not the end of deliberations. We also had a decision, that was in the 90s. In the 2000s, we were deciding where should LRT go. Through that official process. For many reasons, the Kenilworth corridor was not the city's preferred route for Southwest LRT. Then Mayor Ryback, Councilmember Goodman, then Councilmember Ralph Remington, then Councilmember Betsy Hodges, and others argued that LRT should not bypass the dense neighborhoods of South Minneapolis and that it should go in some way through the Midtown corridor. After years of work, the city reluctantly agreed to proceed with the county's preferred alignment of Kenilworth, but we did so with the understanding that long-standing promises that freight would be rerouted, that those promises would be kept. In 2012, The DES showed a co-location plan, co-location of freight and LRT in the Kenilworth corridor that had never advanced through the alternatives analysis phase process, and it had layouts developed not by the county, but by St. Louis Park. The DES, working off those documents, found that co-locating freight and LRT in Kenilworth would be detrimental to the environment. I share this history with you, and in conclusion, to make the following 3 points. The plans for TC&W to move to the M&S corridor have been in the works for many years. Number 2, the concept of co-location was introduced for the purposes of environmental documentation, where it was dismissed. And third, the city of Minneapolis has been and continues to be opposed to co-location for the reasons I have described and others. At this point, I would like to, I believe Jenny Hager is next, and then we will have somebody from CPED speak to you, and then after that, open it for questions, if that's okay with you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Regenius, and I'll welcome forward Jenny Hagar, and I'll just note that we have been joined by Commissioner Peter McLaughlin, as well as several neighbors from neighborhoods in the city of Minneapolis.
Good morning, Madam Chair, council members. Jennifer Hager with Transportation Planning and Engineering in the Public Works Department. Peter has asked me to come up here and talk to you briefly about what the trans system solution is. So late last fall, Met Council, with the input of Hennepin County and both cities, Minneapolis and St. Louis Park, developed a scope of work to bring an independent consultant in to take a look at the freight reroute question. And the first thing that consultant did was take a look at all of the historical documents that have been looked at and developed on this issue over a number of years. So they took a look at those documents, and they took a look at all of the options that are laid out in those documents and tried to get a handle on what those looked like. Then they met with the various stakeholders, including the public agencies, the cities, the railroads, and then they attended 2 different town hall meetings to hear directly from the constituents of the cities. They went back and they came forward with a design that, for the most part, follows the existing MN&S alignment in St. Louis Park. What it does that's different than what previous designs did is that it smooths out the vertical curves within that alignment, the up and down, which is of concern to the railroads, and it also makes less severe and smooths out some of the horizontal curves in that alignment. Their design fully meets ARIMA design standards, which was specified in their scope of work. And in fact, over much of the length, it exceeds those design standards, meeting what are called BNSF, or Burlington Northern and Santa Fe design standards. In addition to fully meeting what was specified as far as engineering goes, this alignment provides a number of benefits to St. Louis Park. Trans system is also calling out a number of items that would improve the existing conditions of the MN&S alignment. Today, the MN&S alignment is older rail of a lower grade than what would be constructed today. So what is proposed is a higher grade rail that would be continuously welded. So there would be less clickety-clack as the train goes over the tracks, and it would be better able to handle current trains, longer trains, heavier trains. They're also calling for some cutting-edge technology that doesn't exist today, things like communications that would help the railroad gain access and travel through, and things to prevent trespassing on the railroad that happens today, fencing and whatnot, in addition to closing a number of at-grade crossings and reducing conflicts along the alignment. Previous concepts put forth by Met Council last summer, known as Brunswick alternatives, were very impactful to the community, and the trans systems design eliminates what was mostly unacceptable as far as high 2-story berms going through that community. In addition, there will no longer be any switching, sorting, or blocking operations by the railroad within St. Louis Park with this new design option. And as Peter alluded to, there are 2 additional at-grade crossings that are eliminated with this alignment and this design, both at Beltline and Wooddale, which are also light rail station locations within St. Louis Park. That improves the development opportunities there and the pedestrian connectivity there, which my friends in CPED will expand upon for you.
Thank you, Ms. Hager. We do have a couple of questions, and these might be for you, and so I want to make sure to take those. We have 3 council members in queue. Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You use the phrase unacceptable or, very undesirable with these berms. As a person who represents an area who has several raised rail corridor crossings, and we're not talking a minor operation, we're talking international rail, third largest in the region, raised several feet in the air. What is, I guess I just have a hard time understanding our other jurisdictions' concern about those, given that I live in an area that has several of them. What demonstrable concern is there, or is it just a concern?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Reich, I don't know that I can speak for the residents of St. Louis Park. But I can say that the so-called Brunswick options that the Met Council had put forth last summer literally showed freight on an alignment that was 2 stories high. So where freight is today, it would go up in several orders of magnitude in people's backyards on a very narrow right-of-way. So there were emotions expressed by those residents with respect to that design.
So it was more of an emotive thing. Again, represent an area that has several of these raised berms, and they've been there since the 20s. There's really no demonstrable outcome of such an arrangement by any posture or any demonstration or any study. It's just an emotive response. Is that your observation?
And I just may say that may be more of a comment from Councilmember Reich, but if Ms. Hager, if you have something that you think is factual to share, please do. But
in fact, I am seeking, is there documentation to that effect, or is it just an emotive response? And if there's documentation, I'm willing to receive it.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Reich, those were comments submitted directly by St. Louis Park residents to the project office.
I think
So more of the emotive, not the, it wasn't a technical documentation. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you. And I just have 2 questions, I think. So you mentioned that several at-grade crossings would be closed. Do you know how many that was? Or maybe you said a few. Are we talking 5 or 6 or 2 or 1?
Sure. Madam Chair, Councilmember Gordon, along the MNNS, 4 at-grade crossings would be eliminated, in addition to eliminating at-grade crossings to the east of the connection with the MNNS at Wooddale and Beltline. So there are a total of 6 that go away with this design.
Okay, thank you. And my other question is, what role does the railroads play in this? Do they have to approve the reroutes? Can they veto one of these? Do they have to accept them? How does that work?
Okay. So procedural next steps, I guess, in the role of the railroads.
Yes, Madam Chair, Councilmember, I'm going to look to Peter because I think he was going to speak to this and offer the podium to him.
Okay.
I can also wait till later if that would be more convenient for the presentation.
All right. So maybe we'll hold that on the procedural next steps, just knowing there are several council members in queue with other questions. So let's take those first. Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Hager. Perhaps this is a question for you, perhaps for Mr. Flom or Mr. Kotke. I was just kind of trying to get in context here about Trans Systems as an organization. Can you help define their credentials and how they came to these conclusions and as part of the process and timing?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Quincy, Trans Systems is a mid-sized firm comprised of about 1,000 professional employees with 37 offices across the nation. They are nationally recognized and have expertise in freight rail design. They have experience with all Class 1 railroads. Civil Design, Inc., which is the engineering firm that the short line railroad that we're working with here, Twin Cities and Western, is a small multidisciplinary firm based in South Dakota. They have, to the best of our ability, to what we were able to locate, about 15 to 20 professional engineers on staff.
Okay, and what's the relationship between those two organizations?
Sure. Trans Systems is the independent consultant that was hired by Met Council to perform the study that we are commenting on the draft right now. And Civil Design, Inc. is the firm that Twin Cities and Western has hired to assist them through this process. They've been with them since early on in the conversation with the draft environmental impact statement and whatnot.
And did they have a separate report, or were there any issues that came out of that we'd like to know about?
Civil Design, Inc. did submit formal comments on the draft study, as we did. Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Hager, I just had some questions about safety because it's such an important issue, and I know all of us take that very seriously. And so I wanted to sort of understand better. Some of the background here is that, the governor directed the Met Council to do this additional freight study. And could you just tell us how was safety defined in that study? Was that something that was the responsibility of the consultant to do, or how did that come to be defined?
Sure, Madam Chair, Councilmember Bender. I will talk about the engineering design standard that was specified by the Met Council in their scope of work. And again, I mentioned previously, but when Met Council developed their scope of work, they did it with the input of Hennepin County and both cities, Minneapolis and St. Louis Park. And the scope of work clearly defines ARIMA as the design standard to be reached on this design. And we know that the design put forth by Trans Systems does fully meet ARIMA design standards, and in most cases exceeds those design standards.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. Could you just briefly, since we are not engineers, describe some of the safety qualities that ARIMA standards include?
ARIMA, Madam Chair, Councilmember Bender, ARIMA will set forth the guidelines for the horizontal and vertical curvature, length of tangent, those sorts of things for the alignment. But the Trans Systems design also includes a number of improvements that are related to safety that are called out in their design. And one of them is called CTC, or Centralized Traffic Control, which is a computerized system that would use remote control to change the signals and the switches along the alignment. And this would help in coordinating the access rights for the short line railroad, TC&W, to gain access up along the alignment and to the BNSF alignment. They need access from both controlling railroads. In addition, the Trans Systems design calls for the option to do an inner guardrail system on the freight alignment that would help with any potential for derailment. Broken rail detection, so defects along the alignment that could be detected and fixed before they become a problem. And we are aware of an ongoing issue with trespassing on the M&NS today. It's a relatively low volume alignment today. And so to protect pedestrians and deter trespassing in the future, they're calling for some fencing of that.
All right, that's all the questions that we have right now. I wonder if we might turn to the process question. And before we take the CPED report, so I think Ms. Hager indicated Mr. Reginius would give an update on that.
If Councilmember Gordon could specifically repeat the question, that would be helpful.
Would you like to repeat that question, Councilmember Gordon?
What authority do the railroads have in determining where a relocation goes, or if their freight line is relocated?
Thank you, Councilmember Gordon. The decision about whether or not freight is relocated belongs to a federal body known as the Surface Transportation Board, or STB, or at least that is the official process. Met Council is now saying that the railroads have to agree to reroute the freight, but that's a decision of the Met Council. That's not the formal process. The formal process is for the Surface Transportation Board to decide.
Has the Surface Transportation Board weighed in on this yet?
They have
and
not
if
been asked to weigh in on this yet.
They have not been asked?
They have not been asked to weigh in on this yet. That's what we're hoping this is going to lead to, because the fact that they haven't been in all this time is part of why we're in this situation.
Are they going to be asked before the preferred route is brought forward or approved by the Met Council?
If freight is being taken seriously, if rerouting the freight is being taken seriously, they would work with Hennepin County, which is the owner of the Kenilworth corridor, to bring that to the Surface Transportation Board.
And right now, we don't know when it's going to go to the Surface Transportation Board?
There's in the scenario that we're concerned about, they wouldn't bring it to the Surface Transportation Board. They would, because again, this is not the formal process. What we're concerned about is that they would, by virtue of giving the railroad a veto power that they would not otherwise have, that they would therefore make a decision to not go to the Surface Transportation Board. That's exactly what our concern is.
That seems like a serious concern, yeah.
Indeed.
Okay, and we had one follow-up, just Mr. Reginius before you sit down. Mr. Reginius, before you sit down. We have one follow-up from Councilmember Reich.
Just following and perhaps extrapolating on that concern, as has been stated, what indication are we to assume as the city that the county will pursue what could be a very significant pursuit on that question through that venue, through that governing body?
Part of what, Councilmember Reich, Madam Chair, part of what makes this process complicated is Hennepin County is no longer the lead agency for the project. They were for a number of years. The lead agency for the project is now the Met Council. If the Met Council proceeds with rerouting the freight, presumably they would reach out to Hennepin County as a partner to go to the Surface Transportation Board. So the property owner is Hennepin County, but the decision right now rests with the Metropolitan Council, and that's what the mayor and council members have expressed, to me, that they're concerned about is that the Met Council might not make a decision that involves Hennepin County using its authority as the owner of the property to go to the Surface Transportation Board. So the decision right now rests with the Metropolitan Council.
And Councilmember Reich, did you have a?
That's very clarifying. I appreciate that, and I guess by way of opining, that we would, as a city, as a municipality that's impacted by this, would implore our partners to do every avenue of due diligence on this matter, and including the one you just described. That we would implore the county, we would implore the Met Council as an earnest partner in this project to do so. And again, that's just opining. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councilmember.
And I did want to reference here, because we are talking about the county, that, again, I had mentioned Commissioner McLaughlin is here, and as the county is a partner, I have told him that we would extend a professional courtesy to have him address the council, but I will do so after the staff presentations. So, all right. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wagenius, one last quick. Mr. Wagenius.
Mr. Wagenius, we have one, and if you want to just hold, Councilmember Bender. Mr. Wagenius, we're going to need you up here one more time. And hello. Yes.
I'm sorry, Councilmember.
That's all right. That's all right. Mr. Wagenius, we have one more question from Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wagenius, do you know how long the process takes to go to the Surface Transportation Board with these kinds of questions?
Well, that depends. If they move forward without the approval of TCW, which again is a scenario that of course should have been baked into the process. The city was never told, we're only doing this if the railroads agree. So that scenario takes some time. By our current estimates, it would take a year. And so that, in any process that was taking freight relocation seriously, that should be baked into the process, unless we were assuming that the freight companies were going to agree, which is not what the city was told in 2010. If the city had been told, we're only doing this if the freight companies agree, I don't think the city would have approved the Kenilworth alignment if we thought the railroad was being given veto power. If the railroads were to agree, the process would be simpler and faster.
And stay right there.
Okay, sorry.
As often happens, comments beget comments. So we have a couple more questions. Councilmember Gordon.
So I'm just curious, did the Met Council actually take a vote on the not sending this forward to the Surface Transportation Board unless the freight companies agreed?
Not that I'm aware of, council member.
But we think this is their decision? Do you know who made the decision?
It has been expressed by staff as a position of the Met Council, but as far as I'm aware, the Met Council has never weighed in on that. Again, if they had, the city would have been very seriously concerned about that, because choosing to say that we will only move forward with the approval of the railroads is a major policy decision. That's a major policy decision. And if that had been expressed to the city, it would have changed how we approached the decision regarding the Kenilworth alignment. And as far as I'm aware, there's no vote taking that position. It's simply a position that's been expressed by Met Council staff.
And I can look this up later too, but I'm just curious, who sits on the Surface Transportation Board and how are they appointed?
There are 3 members of the Surface Transportation Board. There are other people in the room who might be able to answer this question better. They're appointed, I believe, by the president. I think it's prescribed that 2 of them are of the president's party and 1 is not of the president's party. There's currently 1 of the 3 seats is vacant, but I think they're in the process of filling it. I'm going to have people elbow me if I'm describing this incorrectly.
Thank you. And I just wanted to also offer that as our staff is here, if they want to.
Did I get that right?
Okay, thank you.
So it's an accurate description. All right, we do have a couple more comments in queue.
Sure.
Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Agenius, it sounds to me like we're on the path of do what's fastest, do what's easiest, do what's the least resistance, rather than what makes the most sense as it pertains to environmental issues, ridership, or the way the most major partner, the city of Minneapolis, thinks the alignment should be. So I guess my question to you is, if you had known, and if we had known or even contemplated that we would be treated this way, would we have voted for this alignment in the first place?
Madam Chair, I
think that's a bit of a rhetorical question. Let's maybe just leave it at that. But
Madam Chair, no, really, it's not, because I was the only person who voted no last time.
And I just say that because
I have colleagues
Mr.
and
Wagenius
staff.
doesn't have a vote.
Do you believe, Mr. Wagenius, and advising the mayor and members of the council that if we had known that the county wouldn't fulfill its promise to relocate freight, and that the county and the Met Council together would have let the railroad veto any realignment, would you have advised us to vote for that alignment?
And I think Mr. Wagenius is the mayor's policy aide, and I don't know that at this point.
I don't have a vote, but I would just express that there is a difference between the political process and the policy outcome. I would just say that the policy outcome that the city outlined in 2010 was a reasonable conclusion, not a preferred conclusion. The city preferred LRT to go through Midtown, but it was a reasonable conclusion to allow LRT at grade with the freight rerouted, because as our technical staff can describe to you clearly, you can fit 2 LRT tracks where 1 freight track goes, and while there would be greater frequency, which is obviously not welcome, of train traffic, the impact area would be roughly the same as it is today. You can fit it in the same space and maintain the park-like corridor of the condition. So from a public policy standpoint, what was voted upon in 2010 was a reasonable position for the city to take. But obviously, as you pointed out, the situation is not turning out as we anticipated.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair.
Councilmember Goodman.
My follow-up question is, so since we're on a path of we didn't think this would happen, what happens on the next path of we didn't think this would happen if we agreed to some sort of fake shallow tunnel and in the end CTIB and the legislators around the state don't want to do a tunnel, then we end up with co-location at grade, which could result in the condemnation and taking of homes as well as the moving of the bike path. How are we to trust that a promise would be made going forward if we can't trust a promise that's been made to this point?
Okay, and I think that's fair comment to make, and I think we'll take that as comment.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Byers, I think.
Madam Chair and council members, Jack Byers, Manager of Long Range Planning for CPED. I wanted to bring to your attention a series of things that I'm sure you all know and are aware of, but I think it's important in the context of this conversation to have this lens in your mind and certainly in the conversation. The purpose of light rail transit is not light rail transit. It is not to build a train so that we have a train. It is to build a train to serve the public, and so that the public can actually commute from home to work or any other place much more efficiently. So the city's position has always been that Southwest LRT is an important asset for the region. We have been told by the Met Council that the alternative to rerouting freight rail traffic into St. Louis Park would be equal or better as an alternative. And so the Met Council has proposed 2 shallow tunnels with the intention that this is equal or better to rerouting freight traffic. And actually, based on our analysis and the studies, we believe that the impacts for co-location, even with the shallow tunnels, are worse than relocating the freight rail traffic. And that's because of the actual details, which we can get into if you like, but the details of noise, vibration, of course the aesthetics, the difficulty it creates for TOD, and also because the shallow tunnels would eliminate a grade-separated crossing of the Cedar Lake Parkway with the freight rail traffic. So,
and Mr. Byers, I just want to interrupt because you mentioned the TOD, but you're referencing the transit-oriented design of the stationary plans.
That's correct.
All
right. Thank you, Madam Chair. So from a regional perspective, the Kenilworth Corridor, as you know, runs through the chain of lakes and the Grand Rounds. Both of these are part of the regional park system, and they are part of the regional park. They receive regional park funding. That regional park funding is through the Metropolitan Council. Also, the trail has about 2,000 riders a day, many of whom are from outside of Minneapolis but come through Minneapolis to get to home or work. That is also a regional asset, and it has regional funding. TOD is enhanced. We know from great experience in Minneapolis, particularly from the Hiawatha line, that TOD is enhanced if you can actually get developers to build next to a station and if you can create better pedestrian connectivity to that station. So we know from experience on Hiawatha that things are complicated when you have rail lines in the mix. And so by taking the freight traffic out of the Kenilworth Corridor and rerouting it into St. Louis Park, it not only benefits 2 of our stations, the West 21st Street Station and the West Lake Station, it also benefits the Wooddale Station and the Beltline Station in St. Louis Park. And we're concerned that that analysis has not come forward either from the Met Council or from the city of St. Louis Park, and it's actually the city of Minneapolis that has to point out that this regional asset of light rail transit is actually better with co-location if you can create 4 better TOD opportunities, not only to raise property values, but also to raise ridership over the duration of this line. And so the assets of this regional benefit and this particularly special place in the region are not just aesthetic or cultural or recreational. It's also about the commuting public both by train, by LRT, and also by bicycle, and they should not be treated casually in the larger conversation. So we think that the trans systems solution is what really would propel the region forward the most quickly, and it is the most cost effective. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions if you have any.
Okay, there is one council member in queue with a question. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Byers, with respect to this becoming a regional asset, and I know that our own skills are more centered with a depth of experience in Minneapolis, I've heard very little public discussion on the development benefits of relocation from St. Louis Park, and that concerns me. Could you compare or could you attempt to quantify the development benefits of freight relocation versus co-location in whole?
Sure. Madam Chair and Councilmember Palmisano, I don't know that I could quantify it. The trans systems study was scoped by the Metropolitan Council, and that study did an analysis of community impacts on St. Louis Park. It did not do it was not scoped by the Met Council to do a corollary analysis of community impacts in Minneapolis, nor was it scoped that the study would look at the community benefits to Minneapolis and to St. Louis Park. So to date, they have not yet been quantified. And we think that that's an important consideration because the situation at hand, the challenge at hand, is not only a technical situation, it is related to those higher regional assets and benefits.
And one follow-up, if I may. In quantifying this by Met Council, do you know if this will be part of the decision-making process? Because I might just offer, I strongly believe that it should.
Madam Chair and Councilmember Palmisano, I am not aware that the Met Council is considering it, but the staff certainly agrees that it should be taken up.
Okay, Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's actually interesting that we're not sure if Met Council makes such statements about regional growth benefits in terms of benefit, because if they don't, I do not know if the local jurisdiction at this time has identified density and density around transit-oriented development as a benefit. Though we may adopt that locally, and the Met Council may espouse that in some statements, I don't know if they're imposing that sort of term benefit in this manner as we're speaking, and I don't think it's coming from that local jurisdiction either. And it kind of colors the conversation away, where if the local jurisdiction in question, in this case St. Louis Park, does not say in any of their own documents that growth, transit-oriented development growth, is a benefit, and there are opportunities to do that around infrastructure improvements, they're not even the same sheet of music as the Met Council. And is that a fair statement? Do they have a document that corresponds with Met Council's growth strategies for the region? I guess that's my technical question.
Madam Chair and Councilmember Reich, their comprehensive plan is adopted by their City Council and by the Metropolitan Council, as is ours and every other municipality in the region. Their plans do call for transit-oriented development, but St. Louis Park does not have the implementation experience that Minneapolis has. And as I mentioned before, we know very well that things like a freight rail line can actually complicate implementation of TOD.
Just as a follow-up, it intrigues me that they actually have plans that call for it, and I think that we should probably note them in the record moving forward, and probably implore the Met Council to explore their goals, their stated goals, and how we were going to grow this region as a matrix to evaluate how we move forward. Thank you.
I think that's an important point, and if I may add, the Metropolitan Council's current growth projections and draft plan for 2040 is now in public review. It's called Thrive 2040. Sure.
Okay, I am not seeing further questions for you, Dr. Byers. And I wanted to just clarify, did we have any, those were our staff presentations, because I want to ensure that I invite up Commissioner McLaughlin, as I promised to do. And if he is ready, we will take some comment from you. Commissioner McLaughlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. I come here today as someone who advocated for bringing a freight consultant in. They were brought in, and then he declared that he had a conflict. I voted with Mayor Ryback for the study of the freight and the water as a member of the Corridor Management Committee. In addition, we've hired a consultant. There are half a dozen people in the country who are the best legal folks on Surface Transportation Board matters, and so we've spent county money to bring that person in, and he's provided us with good advice, and your staff and your lawyer has met with him. In addition, just in terms of this last discussion, I actually at the last Corridor Management Committee requested the data as an evaluation criteria for comparing the two options. I specifically requested the data of Met Council on the development impacts of the two options, so that the dialogue that Councilmember Palmisano and Commissioner Reich, or Councilmember Reich were urging to happen. There should be data forthcoming in the subsequent meetings of the Corridor Management Committee and the debate of the Met Council to compare the development impacts, because that is, in fact, you're absolutely right, that's one of the factors that absolutely has to be taken into account. So I think I'm in agreement with you. I also have to say, I know there's anger with St. Louis Park. I dare say I'm madder at St. Louis Park than you are, okay? Having been in the deal. And I will tell you, they reneged on the understanding, okay? That's my position. So it's not like I'm not mad at St. Louis Park, believe me. I'm mad. We've spent $4.75 million in ERF money, Environmental Response Fund money, to clean up that Golden Auto site, gave them another loan for $1.1 million. So in terms of the financing that Peter Wagenius noted, the financing for the cleanup of that land, most of the money came from us. And so I'm not happy. Having said that, the water study that was done came back, and it's frankly, there are not significant impacts on the water. That's the conclusion our consultants and our staff people have come to. On the freight relocation, I will comment to you that, again, we brought in an expert to help us to do the analysis on that. It strikes me, and you're going to have to take this into account, it seems to me. It's about a 4-cushion billiard shot to actually get the freight relocation to happen. By four cushion, I mean you've got to have the right angle on the first shot, the second, the third bounce, and the fourth bounce if we're going to actually succeed to get the freight relocation. If it is opposed by the railroad, and the railroad has clearly indicated they are opposed. And it's my understanding, I'm not positive about this, my understanding that the lawyer that they have hired, the railroad has hired, used to be a member of the Surface Transportation Board. So they've got their ace to fight this as well. The railroad situation is a tough one, and I don't blame Lincoln for many things, but I kind of blame Lincoln for giving the railroads as many rights as they've got. And so that is the situation that we're facing. So we're in a delicate moment here. A very delicate moment. And over the weekend, I was thinking about Barbara Tuchman's book, The Guns of August, and it kind of felt like we were doing what they did before World War I. The nations of Europe were sort of moving inexorably toward the catastrophe that was World War I, and it feels a little bit like that's what we're moving toward here, is an impasse. I appreciate the modification to the language that was proposed in the resolution. I think that's a good step. It, I think, reflects the delicacy of the moment. And we have about 2.5 months. It's the 26th of June is when the municipal consent process would come to an end under the current schedule. That would be the deadline under the Met Council's process. And so there is time here to work on this. I think we do need to do that. I think that if we're going to pursue the equity goals of this council, the One Minneapolis idea, that we need to And if we're going to create a 21st century transportation system, we've got to make sure that we get Southwest Transit built. And so I think we're in this together to try to get this built. I've tried to be an honest broker, but I truly believe we need to get this line built, and I think we can. Your resolution today and the modifications, I think, are a good place for the city of Minneapolis to be at this point, and we've got 2 months of work ahead of us so that we can make a decision that's good for Minneapolis, good for the county, good for the region. So, Madam Chair, I appreciate the chance to comment today.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McLaughlin. There are some council members who are in queue, although I just want to say I'm not sure if you want to take questions, or maybe we should allow these as comments. I'm not quite sure what my colleagues have, and so maybe I might just ask her these comments, or was there more of a factual question for the commissioner? Because we want to allow both, but
Do whatever you like, ma'am.
Okay. Right. All right. So, and thank you again. So, Councilman Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And there are a lot of, representatives up here who are newer to the process than probably some of the negotiations that went on before. And you referenced a cleanup of a site. Would it be, I want to use the word renege.
I did as well, Madam Chair.
And so there seems to be a reneging, but it's a reneging of a drafted agreement or what would be in the common parlance, gentleman's agreement.
In the modern parlance, probably a gentle person's agreement, but for which there is ample, I would argue, circumstantial evidence. Mm-hmm. There are references in statute. It's not a contractually enforceable language, but there are references in statute. There are references in our agreement with the railroad about that they would move when I believe the language is feasible and operationally efficient alternative is offered. What those words mean would have to be, that's one of the cushions in the 4 cushion chart I'm talking about, is what that contractual language means and how whether we would be able to enforce it through the option that's available. But there was an understanding, and money flowed based on that understanding, cleaning up that site. And so they've kind of changed their decision rule from they would allow the freight to be moved to, if there's no other alternative, then they would accept the freight being moved. That's the change in the position, I believe, that St. Louis Park is.
And Madam Chair and Mr. Commissioner, I don't really raise that to be rhetorical. I just wanted to reinforce the historical record of how significant the discussions were and how they were registered. And if you can correct me if I'm wrong, they seem substantial, real, and recordable.
Madam Chair, if I might. That's true. That's why I'm not happy. That's why I'm angry. But 17 years have passed. 17 years. And in that 17 years, the railroad industry has gone from being on a decline to being more in ascent. There are safety concerns that have changed and standards that have changed. And frankly, the market, I had a county commissioner from who has contacts all the way out along this line, all the way to the border in South Dakota, saying that the shippers are concerned. And the reality of control of railroads is that they have a lot of cards to play. And so I think we're going to have to walk our way through this. I don't think the history is necessarily going to be controlling here. It's an annoyance, but I think we have to deal with the situation in front of us right now, because it's unclear what our chances would be of actually enforcing that understanding if the railroad did not want to go along.
And Madam Chair and Mr. Commissioner, as a final follow-up to my initial question, you say annoyance, but could it be fair to say it could also be posited as a pivot point of the conversation moving forward? A pivot point?
Madam Chair,
However historical.
Councilmember Wright, I don't know exactly what you mean by pivot point. I'm not sure that a review of the history is going to be particularly instructive right now. I think we need to decide what are the options at our disposal right now, and what are the probabilities. It's a factor. There were understandings. Those are a factor in the decision-making process, but I don't think the history and the commitments of 17 years ago are necessarily going to be able to force decisions today.
And again, Madam Chair and Mr. Commissioner, I'm not seeking trump cards. I'm just saying these are facts on the table that can't be dismissed.
Madam Chair, that's fair. I'm looking for trump cards, so.
Fair enough.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Wright. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner McLaughlin, my friend, thank you for being here today. I'm sorry you're having to defend the perhaps past bad behavior by some of your colleagues and now the Met Council, and I realize you're trying to do the right thing, and I have a great respect for you in that regard. I have 4 separate questions for you. With regard to the railroad in particular, and the fact that it seems to those of us who have met with them, and I did have the opportunity to meet with the owner, Martha Head, and Mark Wagner, and their lobbyist, Al Hofstede, along with the mayor. It seems to me, and I'm wondering if it seems to you, that what they're asking for is an enhancement. It's almost like they want something, but they won't tell us what it is. So wouldn't you agree that it seems in this big picture that they're trying to get something from us, and isn't giving veto power to a private sector company like this is setting a dangerous precedent for rail projects in the region?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Goodman, I would say that they're, in my experience over a number of years on these types of projects, that the requests that they're making are not unlike those that are made by other railroads in these circumstances. And there is not a precedent being set here, I don't think. I think the precedent was set long ago. That's why I invoke Lincoln and what he has the legacy he has left on this issue. So I don't think it's anything new. They have enormous influence, and the parameters by which the Surface Transportation Board must make decisions, and I'm not a lawyer, but the parameters that they operate under are fairly limited. It's about the efficiency of the rail system and the financial viability of the railroads and the protection of the shippers. That's not a legal recitation, but that's kind of how they make their decision. That's not about safety or about impacts on the community or any of those things that we're concerned about here. So that's the world we're operating in, the legal framework.
You would agree that the water study that's been done might say there's no immediate impact that we can identify right now, because essentially what it says is we don't even know what problems could happen because we're only at 30% at the most engineering. The study I've read it to essentially says, given what we know now, which is essentially nothing, there might not be a problem, but as you move forward, there could be problems.
Well, Madam Chair, I'm not an engineer either. So my experience, though, with engineering documents is there are qualifiers, there are footnotes in almost any representation that they make. This was a fairly strong recommendation, complemented by, in terms of an assessment that they made, complemented by the recommendation that additional monitoring wells be put in to make sure that during construction and during the operation of the line, that we'd actually know more of what was going on in an area that was essentially a swamp 200 years ago. And so that's where the reassurance comes in my mind that this is what you get. I don't think we can be Luddites about engineering. I think that this is a fairly strong statement of engineering assurance with the usual caveats about we're not going to guarantee it.
And this may be one where, if you wish, Councilmember Goodman, we can also ask for additional response from our staff on whether they've fully been able to review to date. So.
Okay, I mean, I guess I'm just trying to make the point that I saw the study and it basically said, given what we know now, there might not be a problem, but you're only at 30% engineering, so we don't know what would happen in the future, and I just want to liken it to the situation at 1800 Knox, where a developer came in and said, oh, we always build two-story garages in the basement, now we have a massive dewatering issue with water being pumped into Lake Calhoun for a very simple two-story underground garage that wasn't supposed to be a big deal. So I don't know, it seems to me digging these kind of fake shallow tunnels into the water table could present a problem later, and I know the Park Board's doing a separate water study on this as well. So I just think, yes, they've said, given what we know now, there might not be an issue, but there's a whole bunch of unanswered questions, and if you live near this, you'd probably would want to have answers to the unanswered questions.
So Madam Chair, the analogy, though they did specifically speak to the analogy to the apartment building, and that the hydrology of the apartment building is different. And again, not an engineer, but they called that out because that was a concern that was raised in the hearings. The hydrology is not the same. It's not anticipated that there's going to have to be ongoing, active dewatering after this facility is built.
But they didn't anticipate that at 1800 Knox either.
I don't know the answer. That was.
I think for this particular issue, since these are more
right.
engineering review questions, maybe I know Councilmember Goodman has some additional questions, so I want to make sure she gets a chance to ask them.
I know you described this as a delicate moment, and I guess I would describe it as we've sat quietly during all of the other delicate moments and been hit over the head by a bat. So now all of a sudden we're being asked to sit quietly through a delicate moment when you slam this out of the ballpark and shove it down our throats. That's what it feels like to me. So what is delicate about this moment? That we might actually stand up for Minneapolis and say this isn't right for us on a number of levels and not move forward? I mean, what's delicate is you want us to not say no so that you can move forward. And what we're telling you is, in whatever soft, medium, or hard language we need, we're not comfortable with this. And you need to look for other alternatives that don't mean just shoving it down our throats. So I'm confused about this delicate moment thing. And then it gets into my second question of, let Botno go first then. How does Minneapolis lose from that? That's the equity argument, where the line runs through North Minneapolis, where people who have transportation issues really need it. And where I live in Bryn Mawr, that is hardly an equity issue.
So, Madam Chair, Councilmember Goodman, the delicacy is that this line could be killed. And I don't think that's in the long-term interest of the city of Minneapolis. I don't think if we're going to be talking about one Minneapolis, if we're going to be talking about a modern transit system, that is not in the interest of Minneapolis. And I have told the mayor and I've told St. Louis Park representatives that, frankly, either option that's on the table right now is preferable in both St. Louis Park and Minneapolis to not building this line. And that's my judgment. I have been doing my best, and I tried to say that in my introductory comment, doing my best to make sure that the freight alternative, the freight relocation alternative, was adequately studied. We're still working on that. And so that, I think, that's our posture right now. And I think killing this line, ultimately, in this 2.5-month process, I think would be bad for the long-term interests of the city of Minneapolis. Secondly, the notion of sort of search and substitute on all documents and just kind of throw Botno in, that's not how it's going to work. With the Obama administration, there are 1,100 days left in the Obama administration. The Obama administration, fewer than 1,100. This administration is supportive of this region. They came to town last week. Pretty good indication that they like the work that we're doing. For us to fumble on this and delay it, I think is problematic. And so I believe that we're at a moment here where we need to make a decision. We need to work it through. There's a process here that's going to go through June 26th in the schedule that the Met Council set up, and I think we need to do it. I think that's critically important, and I think if we're talking about the fate of Botno is going to be better off if Southwest gets built on the current schedule, because we'll keep our reputation with the federal government as a region that builds projects on time, on budget, and a region that's creating a regional system. And that's what we're committed to doing. And it's my clear judgment that Bottom is way better off if we build Southwest than if we let it fail or let it go and be postponed for 5 years. I mean, there are regions around the country just waiting to jump past us, and that is a huge threat to the long-term transportation system in this region.
So, Madam Chair, I mean, that I think really summed it up. Minneapolis, you better take something that will destroy your community for the team or see the project killed. That's really what you're saying. I mean, you might as well just say that directly out loud. Take this thing that's horrible for the people surrounding it as well as the region as it pertains to environmental issues. Go back on promises that were made, or you guys will be responsible. I hope you're going to do the same thing in St. Louis Park and call them responsible for killing the rail line, because they won't go forward with an agreement they made when we gave our municipal consent.
And I'm just going to take that as comment, and Councilmember Goodman, that's why we're here, is to be able to have public dialogue, and so thank you for putting your thoughts out there. I also want to respect that Commissioner McLaughlin has been standing up here for a significant amount of time. I know that there are lots of other council members, and I'm unclear if these are comments or questions, but I might invite Commissioner McLaughlin to go ahead and take a seat. If there is one of these comments that does require an interaction with the commissioner, he is here, and I'm sure he'd be willing to answer, again, questions. But these may be more comments, or I know some folks do have some questions that are more appropriate for our public works staff. And and then I'll also note we are just a few minutes before noon, and I don't say that to cut off what I know is an extremely significant and important discussion, but just to note for others that we do have a resolution that will be put before us, and the motion has not yet been made on that. So, Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Chair Glidden. Thank you, Commissioner McLaughlin. It was good timing on that because what I'm about to say is predominantly comment. However, I may have a question towards the end. My main frustration is this idea of a promise and reneging on that promise. The statute, which I've read in extent, as well as the commentary and the testimony, in my mind it's exceedingly clear. St. Louis Park had upwards of $5 million in total, about $1 million from the state, a substantial amount of money through debting and bonding, and from the county, $5 million in total to do remediation of a particular site, which was the Golden Auto site, and to do economic development around that corridor. Now, they didn't just get that money for free. Let me say it again. They did not just get that money for free. This was a precondition. In return for getting that money, they promised, in no uncertain terms, to take the freight reroute when it came time, and it is now time. And just to really give the rundown of this wasn't some vague idea or vague concept that was considered. It's definitive, and it's in the statute. It was in 1997. I was a sophomore in high school, I think, and they gave the rundown pretty clearly here. It's the fund created, and this is MnStat 338B.81. It's the Environmental Response Fund. It's the uses of the fund. The fund created in Subdivision 1 must be used for the following purposes: is acquisition through purchase or condemnation of lands or property which are polluted. They got that money. 2, paying the costs associated with indemnifying or holding harmless the entity taking the lands. 3, paying for the cost of remediating the lands. 4, once again, paying for the pollution costs. And number 5, contemplates rail traffic. And they outline specifically in Subdivision 6, it says the first priority for the use of the Environmental Response Fund created in this section is to clean up the site located in St. Louis Park, and to provide adequate right-of-way for a portion of the rail line to replace the 29th Street line in the city of Minneapolis, including making rail improvements, changing the curve of the railroad track, and eliminating a switching facility. That switching facility, by the way, is still there, and I think would provide, if it was eliminated and they did additional economic development there, it would provide substantial benefit for St. Louis Park, so I don't even know why they would be opposed to this. And finally, and improving the land for economic development. Secondly, this is Chapter 231, Article 16. And this is the most important part. Grants from these accounts, so in other words, that money, shall be available only upon confirmation from the Commissioner of Transportation that Hennepin County and the City of St. Louis Park have entered an agreement, and specifically that agreement was to ultimately take the rail. To qualify for receipt of the funds under Subdivision 1, Hennepin County and the St. Louis Park, after consultation and negotiation with the representatives of affected neighborhoods along the impacted and proposed rail line, enter an agreement with respect to the following. Number one, and here's where it is. A portion of the site must be used to provide adequate rights-of-way for transferring railroad traffic from the Canadian Pacific Railroad line from Louisiana Avenue and St. Louis Park easterly to Trunk Highway 55 Hiawatha Avenue, commonly referred to as the 29th Street Depression, to the Canadian Pacific Railroad line from 29th Street Rail Line northernly to the Burlington Northern Connection entirely within the city of St. Louis Park. This seems to be extremely plain language to me. I don't know how they get out of it. Additionally, there's testimony and commentary from Senator Steve Kelly. Senator Steve Kelly says county officials say the move was intended to be temporary, and that's the move, by the way, to the Kenilworth corridor. They point to the 1997 legislation by former state Senator Steve Kelly, and he says this. He says, this project is going to be at the top of the list. We're going to get this site cleaned up and that construction done so that the trains can run through St. Louis Park as soon as possible. St. Louis Park ultimately took the money. In order to take that money, they made an agreement. We're now operating as if that agreement didn't exist, and I think we need to hold them to that contract.
All right, Councilmember Andrew Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say, I think there's a George W. Bush quote out there about shame on some people for being fooled or something like that. But basically, we have established that St. Louis Park has reneged on this deal to reroute freight, and I want to see this project move forward. When thinking about the shallow tunnel, though, I wonder what would stop, especially reading the CTIB letter about budget constraints and a reminder to us that we are within tight project budget constraints. What would stop us from basically being reneged on again and saying, okay, well, you've provided municipal consent, and I'm sorry, but the shallow tunnel, we don't have funding for it. It can't go through. And I do believe, and maybe staff or our Mr. Commissioner or my fellow colleagues can remind me, wasn't there some sort of underground tunnel with the Central Corridor project that was supposed to happen and then was pulled out due to budget constraints? I thought I heard something about that.
So Commissioner McLaughlin clearly wants to respond to that, and I just want to note that Peter Reginius has also asked to have some response to the points made.
The clear understanding that we have and Met Council has is that if a shallow tunnel were approved with municipal consent, and then at a later time, for whatever reason, that shallow tunnel had to be abandoned, that municipal consent would once again be required. So there would still be a new municipal consent would be required. The analogy to the University of Minnesota situation is not appropriate. The tunnel that was discussed at the University of Minnesota was never approved as the locally preferred alternative. It was discussed in the earlier stages of the discussion of the Central Corridor. It was never approved. I was there when the Board of Regents provided municipal consent for the at-grade, that was the only municipal consent that the University of Minnesota provided for the at-grade transit plaza that is now being built and will open up within a few months. So that the analogy to the University of Minnesota situation is not accurate. The municipal consent, if it were provided for a shallow tunnel, and there for whatever reason that had to be abandoned, the Met Council would have to be back here at this City Council to get a new municipal consent for whatever was proposed as an alternative.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. And I was interested in details on that university piece, so I didn't mean to say that that's the analogy. I was wondering history on that. And I would ask our city attorney if that would be legally binding around municipal consent being withdrawn and if there is the possibility that the state legislature could override that somehow.
So I am going to first let Peter Wagenius comment and let the city attorney kind of review that question, knowing that we are going to return to her for some comment on that. Peter Wagenius.
Madam Chair, first of all, Commissioner McLaughlin is correct. The parallel with the university is not the same situation here. He is also correct that we have been provided the assurance on multiple occasions by the Met Council that were one or both of the shallow tunnels to disappear at some later point or be taken out of the project, we would be asked to provide municipal consent again. Two things on that point. I want folks to appreciate, while that's Commissioner has represented the process accurately, the political reality of what it would be with bulldozers poised in the event that information came, the pressure on you to not stand in the way of the project would be monumentally higher than the pressure that is already being felt as it relates to this project. So I just want to make that point. That has to be taken into account on top of the official process. Second of all, we have been, and for that reason, both under Mayor Ryback and under the Mayor Hodges, we have asked again and again and again the Met Council to provide us with some reassurance greater than simply having a second bite at the apple, precisely because the time to get those decisions made and those reassurances is now. The Commissioner's description of the June 30th, June 26th deadline, whatever it is accurate, and we should take it seriously, if for no other reason than the governor takes it seriously, and he's the only reason we have the Trans-Systems report. So for all those reasons, now is the time to get the assurances, both what Commissioner McLaughlin referred to and what Mayor Ryback and Mayor Hodges have both been asking for in addition to that, and we're going to be working with our city attorney's office to make sure we get something beyond that. And number two, we are counseled constantly by our city attorney's office that we are a creature of the state, and the legislature does have powers to override. But on that point, I would defer to this attorney directly.
And I'm unclear if Mr. Conover or Ms. Siegel is prepared to comment, but I know there was a little conference that took place. So,
Madam Chair, I'll start, and then I may have to defer to my expert, Mr. Conover. But if on the question of municipal consent, if there are changes made by the Met Council, it is our interpretation that they need to resubmit that to the local jurisdictions. And then also, obviously, the legislature can, as Mr. Wagenius said, override or overturn things. They have the ultimate authority. And I don't know, Mr. Conover, if you want to add to that response or if there are additional questions.
All right. Thank you very much. And I'm going to turn the chair for just a moment to Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question for Commissioner McLaughlin, and I do want to thank you for your leadership and share your commitment to building the Southwest Light Rail line. The county's Transit Improvement Board, CTIB, passed a resolution that created a deadline for municipal consent for this project, June 30th, 2014. Do you feel that it is possible for a resolution to come forward that would allow for the relocation of freight within that time frame? Are there actions being taken by the Metropolitan Council or Hennepin County or anyone to really actively and meaningfully pursue that option? Or are we being asked to basically support an option that doesn't include freight relocation as a meaningful choice?
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Bender, the County's Transit Improvement Board, when it put that deadline in, the original proposal was for an earlier deadline. We moved it to the 30th so that the municipal consent schedule could be fulfilled. Secondly, it was an explicit commitment on the part, and statements were made explicitly by various county commissioners that this was not picking between the alternatives. The exhortation inherent in that resolution was, it's time to pick. And so there was no effort to pick which of the two alternatives was better. We wanted to make sure that, and this was across all 5 counties that are in CTIB, that it was time to make a decision. Third, we are looking at what that schedule would look like, and we think that there is a way to do it to meet the deadline. Yes.
Great. Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you. Thank you again, Commissioner, for being here. And I just wanted to let everyone know, of course, that I'm a huge supporter of the Southwest LRT project, and I want to see it go forward. But as Councilmember Goodman pointed out earlier, because I voted on that LPA, I wanted to make sure the co-location was a big factor in my decision. I guess I wanted to kind of shift the conversation back to a public works conversation. So if Ms. Hager could join the thing. I wanted to talk about the reports, specifically the CDI report and the trans report. If you could identify any flaws that you found in those and any conflicts that we might have to overcome for that process.
Sure, Madam Chair, council members. The City of Minneapolis did review both reports and did submit technical comments on Monday as requested by the Met Council. Generally, we did find that the statements made by Trans Systems with respect to meeting the AREMA design standard as required by them are true. We found that the curvature and the profile and alignment of their design meets those standards and in many cases exceeds those standards as previously stated. We also did review the report that Civil Design Inc. submitted, and again, Civil Design Inc. is the engineering firm retained by TC&W to advise them through this process. And we found a number of technical errors within their report and their conclusions and some of their statements. And we have included those in great detail in our staff submitted comments to the Met Council. I'd be happy to walk through some of those here if you'd like, but there was probably about 1.5 to 2 pages of comments that we submitted on that item.
I assume the chair's returned to Vice President Clinton. Thank you. Have those comments, have we been shared those comments back? If not, I'd appreciate receiving a copy of those. And if you wanted to maybe highlight some of the technical things that you can identify, that would be great. I don't expect you to read 1.5 pages of comments, but thank you.
Sure, Madam Chair, council members, you did receive a copy of these comments. I think Peter Wagenius had emailed a packet out, including the letter from Mayor Hodges on Monday. Generally, just to summarize, we have consistently heard from the railroad that they have concerns about horizontal curves and grades up and down along the alignment, and they put a lot of weight on that concern, rightfully so. And they go on to make a bold statement that the Kenilworth corridor is significantly better than the design put forth by Trans Systems, and we are not finding the technical information to back that statement up. In fact, we can refute that in some cases here, and if I can just go into a little bit of technical weeds with you, the CDI report notes that a 120-car unit train is approximately 7,700 feet in length, and that the Trans Systems alignment contains 3 reversing curves within a distance of 5,000 feet. So reversing curves, changing direction with a horizontal right and left movement. What they fail to note is that within the Kenilworth alignment, there's 3 reversing curves within a distance of 6,900 feet in one segment and 4 reversing curves within a distance of 6,000 feet on another segment. So there are challenges with curvature in both alignments, but they both can meet the needs of the railroads there, obviously, because they're using Kenilworth today and because the Trans Systems design meets the design standards set forth. CDI also directly quotes a portion of an AREMA engineering publication. And I want to find our comment on that here, where they talk about the concern and why reversing curves are a concern for the railroads. We had some staff locate that actual publication and read it in full. And what we found is that their statement, their quote, was pulled out of context and used out of context in their report. So the statement is really talking about a true reverse curve where there's zero tangent between the curves. And the Trans-Systems design actually calls for 880 feet of tangent between reversing curves, whereas the most stringent standard that we're looking at here, which is the BNSF design standard, calls for a minimum of 200 feet. And so the design by Trans-Systems far exceeds that requirement. And we've pulled out and actually provided the full quote from that publication in our technical comments.
Thank you, Ms. Hagar. So we are, I think, getting to the end of folks' ability to stay for this meeting, knowing that we still haven't had the resolution put before us. And I know Councilmember Reich is in queue to be able to make that motion. And I understand Councilmembers Palmisano and Goodman have been so gracious to try to reduce their comments to as brief as possible, just so we're able to get to the resolution, please. Thank you. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this question is rather quick, and I think it might be for Commissioner McLaughlin. If freight gets co-located in the Kenilworth corridor, who owns the land underneath those railroad tracks?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Palmisano, we currently own it. It would be our intention to transfer that ownership to either the Metropolitan Council or to the state at this point, but that is not resolved at this moment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the way you've handled this hearing that could have been really ugly and was not as a result of your leadership, so thank you. I just want to make one final point with regard to the issue of municipal consent, and without putting our attorney on the spot, because she'd love to argue that we have it and they can't move forward without it. The truth of the matter is they can move forward without it. We can say no, and they can say too bad. They can do that now, and they can do that later. So we can say no now, and they can say, oh, you evil people, you've killed Southwest LRT, but we don't want to kill Southwest LRT. It's too big to fail. It's like the Viking Stadium, so let's just keep moving forward, even if it's a bad idea, in this location, with this alignment, under these circumstances. And they can do that in the future as well. So if we come forward and say, yes, we'll agree to these fake shallow tunnels that will destroy the entire corridor, and in the end, legislators from Greater Minnesota, legislators from the East Metro, CTIB members or others, decide that this fake shallow tunnel thing is a bad idea and too expensive, they can move forward without our consent. We can say, no, we don't like it, it's terrible, but as has been said by, I think, Peter Wagenius, when the shovel is ready, they can go to the state and shove it down our throats at that point. That is the risk that we take in moving forward with this issue of municipal consent. So it is absolutely unfair to say we have the power to stop it later. We do not.
Okay. And I'm not, were those your exact words? I don't think so. Anyway, come on, it's 12:17. All right. Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a submitted resolution which I hope to modify the very end part to now reflect the language as I will read. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council, City of Minneapolis, that the City of Minneapolis reaffirms the same position it has held since 2010, which is that the City of Minneapolis opposes co-location of both freight and LRT together in the Kenilworth corridor, and this includes the shallow tunnel options. And all the other supporting statements to that point stand. And to Councilmember Goodman's point, this is our position, and it is not modified thus. We move forward with our position strong. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, and so we do have this motion before us, and I think it's just thank you for just alerting us, because I know there's been a couple of just different drafts, and so thank you for clarifying for us the final version. And so at this point, if there is discussion on the motion, I will take that. I'm just unclear. Councilmember Fry, did you have discussion on the motion?
Chair Glidden, it's one brief one-sentence comment, and then I'm happy to move forward. I just wanted to make very clear that I, and I think most of my colleagues, very much want Southwest Light Rail in some form. For me specifically, it's just important the contracts and specifically those that are in statutes to be valid and honored.
And I am not seeing further discussion, so the motion is before us. Is there? Okay, and Councilmember Reich, did you have an additional comment on the motion?
And, I would just extend to those who are listening from other jurisdictions that, we've been very thoughtful. This has been a good discussion, but just because we're not jumping up and down and yelling loud doesn't mean we don't mean what we say. That's my only point, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And seeing no further discussion, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that item is approved. With that, we have concluded with our agenda for Committee of the Whole. We do traditionally at this point in time have reports from committees. Due to the lateness of the hour, I'm going to ask committee chairs not to make their reports and refer folks to what is in their books. But if there is something that you believe is critical to alert your colleagues to, I'm just going to open that opportunity to committee chairs to alert colleagues to anything that you feel is critical from your committee. Councilmember Goodman. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a number of items on our agenda. I only want to speak to one of them. This is the Community Development and Regulatory Services agenda. This is a fairly serious and significant action to revoke the liquor license at Champions Bar. It is very infrequent that we do something like this. We had a very good, thoughtful discussion in committee, and there is a prepared findings of fact that I would encourage everyone to take an opportunity to read. And I'll just leave it at that and note the severity of an action like this and the very intense findings, 75 findings of fact by the administrative law judge. And actually, it is quite an interesting read.
Okay. Thank you for that. And that is exactly the kind of item that if other committee chairs would like to alert council members to, I invite you to do so. And I'm just looking around and I'm not seeing any other takers there. I will alert colleagues to one item that is in, you will find in motions, and it will appear on the agenda as a new motion. This is actually an intergovernmental relations item that was not ready at the time of our committee, but has been requested, personally requested by Speaker Thiessen, as well as our IGR staff, for us to add as a support item on our legislative agenda. There is what has been termed the Women's Economic Security Act, which has been proposed at the state legislature. I will just note that it aligns very strongly already with many of the positions on our agenda, and this just formalizes our support around what are several statutory amendments that are being proposed as part of this Women's Economic Security Act, and invites you to take a look at that. And with that, I'm just looking here. I believe that we have concluded with our business, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.